Hey, what's up YouTube? This is Yuanjian. I'm bringing you another camera tutorial video for the current two most famous Sony mirrorless cameras, Sony A7S3 and Sony FX3. If you have ever used both Sony and Canon cameras, you know that the manual system is just so much more complicated in Sony cameras. For the same reason, Sony cameras are just not beginner friendly if you don't know how to set them up correctly. It is discouraging to have to understand 52 pages of manuals before even using a camera. Therefore, I propose the top 8 camera settings you can follow to make your life much easier. So without further ado, let's roll the intro. Camera setting number 1, exposure. Almost for any camera, you need to know how to quickly set these parameters related to exposure: aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. Aperture controls the size of the hole the camera opens, influencing the amount of light that can go through. In cameras, the aperture size is measured by an f number. The lower the number is, the larger the aperture. A larger aperture can also result in a shallower depth of field, which usually creates a more cinematic feeling. On Sony A7S3, the aperture is controlled by the wheel on the front side. It can also be changed to the back side by selecting AVTV inside the menu. Shutter speed controls the amount of time light can reach the sensor. For instance, 1/50 means each frame is exposed for 1/50 seconds. To achieve a natural motion blur, we usually set the shutter speed to be 1/2 times the frame rates. Note that if we plan to use catalyst to stabilize the image in post, the shutter speed should be much faster than 1/50. Otherwise, the motion blur will be totally off after stabilization. On Sony A7 III, the shutter speed is controlled by the wheel on the backside by default. It can also be changed to the front side with the AVTV setting. ISO controls the sensitivity of the sensor. In simple words, the higher the ISO, the brighter the image. Usually a higher ISO can cause more obvious noisy points in the image. However, Sony has unique technology in lowlight. When you bump the ISO up to 12800, it's the second level of the base ISO, and the image will be super clean. One common mistake is to keep a very low ISO in low light conditions. Don't be afraid to crank up ISO for clean low light images when using high-end Sony cameras. Camera setting number 2, recording format. The current video standard has transformed from 1080p to 4K, so consider 4K resolution if your camera supports it. The frame rate standard for web content or movies is 24 frames per second in the United States, and it could be 25 frames per second in Asia. For TV broadcasting, the requirement will be 30 frames per second. I'm currently in the US and I don't record videos for TV broadcasting, so I will set my camera to record in 4K 24 frames per second. Another typical setting is 4K 60 frames per second, usually used for slow motion. An alternative way to make slow motion videos is to use the S&Q mode. In this mode, the camera will slow down the video for you so that you don't need to interpret the footage in the post. But keep in mind that S&Q mode does not record audio. For codecs, there are XAVC-I and XAVC-S in Sony A7S III. To obtain a less compressed image, we should stick to XAVC-I. Camera setting number 3, color profile. A Sony camera's natural color science is usually not as good as Canon cameras, but by shooting in S-Log3, we offer much potential to post-production. Because Sony offers total customizability, some color profile settings can make the direct out-of-camera images as good as Canon's or are especially good for low-light conditions. However, they are too tedious to state in the video, so I'll put them in the description down below. In the video, I hope to show you how to expose an S-Log3 image properly and how to color correct it quickly in post-production. When shooting in Log3 mode, we need to control the ISO to be over 640 to obtain a cleaner image. And also we need to overexpose the image a little bit. Many people say that we should overexpose it by 2 stops, but I found it just like we can overexpose a little bit instead of too much. 1 stop looks fine to me. Okay, so now let's get into the color correction. And I just dragged that clip. This is the clip from the media pool to the timeline, and I applied a adjustment layer. You can create the adjustment layer here and drag it to the timeline. Now this is the footage shot in S-Log3. What I will do is to apply a LUT to transform the color space from S-Log3 to Rec 709. Boom. You see that? It's pretty easy. The color is already there, and you can probably adjust the exposure, contrast a little bit, highlights a little bit, shadows a little bit, and this image will look pretty good. Okay, this is in Premiere Pro, and you can download this for LUT from Sony's official website. Camera setting number 4, focus. When recording a scene behind the camera, I will usually set it to manual focus, because we don't want the camera to hunt for another object and to change focus while recording. However, what is in focus is not always that obvious, especially when looking at some small screen. There are 4 tools to help us with the focus. The first tool is to try autofocus. The camera system can often do a better job than us, so it's worth a try to use the autofocus system to find the focus, and we can then turn it off to manual focus once the focus is found. The second tool is called focus peaking. The camera can use red lines to indicate the objects in focus. It's very handy when manually adjusting the focus. The third tool is focus magnitude, which basically enlarges the image so we can see the focus more clearly. And the last tool is an external monitor to make the picture larger. With a larger picture, we can be more confident about what objects are actually in focus. Camera setting number 5, playback and storage. A very basic one, but very important one. Okay, so now let's look at the playback and storage in Sony A7S3. The playback is pretty simple. Click this button here, and we can use the wheel to navigate through all the footage we have, and click display to look at different way to display it. And in this way we can see we have 26 footage in total, and we're looking at the 16th for example, and it will play back. Pretty easy. And we can just exit by clicking some other buttons. And another thing to look at is how to format the card. It's here. The second menu is called shooting. The first is the my menu. It's customizable. We want to look at the shooting menu, second, media, format, and we can choose the slot. I only have one SD card in there, so slot 2 will be grayed out, but if I insert 2 of them, I can format either one. And look at this. So this is slot 1, the upper one is the slot 1, and this one is the slot 2. If I click this button, all the data will be lost, so I don't want to do that. And that's pretty much it. As for the Sony FX3, actually I ignored most of them because they are just identical. So if I click the menu, the camera body is a little bit different, but the menu system is identical. So still here, media, format, I can do the same thing, and I can get out, I can click this button to play back the footage, and I only have one clip in there, so this is for Sony FX3. Camera setting number 6, wireless connection and monitoring. The industrial standard to monitor the image is to use a wireless transmitter and a wireless monitor. Okay, so now I will show you the professional monitor transmitter setup. We need a monitor, the camera, and the transmitter set. There are 2 of them. One is the transmitter and the other is the receiver. And we need 2 HDMI cable. I will connect one of them to the Sony camera, connect the other side to the transmitter, to the sender, and at the receiver side, I will connect the HDMI cable to the HDMI in to the monitor, and the other side to the HDMI out of the receiver. And I'll turn the monitor on, turn the camera on, and then turn the transmitter on. We are in So the transmitter needs to be set up to a channel. That's channel 4, and this is also at the same channel. So the transmitter and the monitor and the camera will have the same footage, and I can start recording here. If I start recording, it's recording and I can see it in the monitor. Okay, that's how the transmitter receiver setup works. But they are usually very expensive. Is there a cheaper option? The answer is yes for Sony cameras. Sony offers an app called Imaging Edge that allows your iPad or computer to connect to the camera. Camera setting number 7, audio. There is a regular audio port on the camera body of the Sony A7S3, and we can mount a Rode shotgun mic on top of it. To adjust the audio level, we hope the audio level is between -12 dB and -6 dB, and it's crucial to make sure that there's no peaking during the recording. Before the actual filming, it's always necessary to test the audio and ensure the audio levels are correct. To obtain the best audio quality, we may hope to externally record the audio with professional microphones and audio recorders. Camera setting number 8, gimbal and stabilization. One of the most significant advantages of this kind of mirrorless camera compared to a cinema camera is its convenience with a gimbal. We can easily mount it on top of a gimbal and shoot a stable video. There is a stable mode inside the camera. I recommend turning it off when using a gimbal because they can possibly fight against each other and create a bizarre warp effect. When hand holding the camera, turn the stable mode on so the image will not be so shaky. Okay, so above are the top 8 camera settings for Sony A7S3 and FX3. I believe that you can easily generalize it to other Sony mirrorless cameras. If you find the content interesting and helpful, please smash the like button and subscribe to the channel for more awesomeness, and I'll see you next time.